What's up, Foxy and Fox here? And if you look around, it's been kind of interesting to see a bunch of people just randomly get PlayStation 5s this December and November. I don't get why. There must have been an influx of stock or something like that, because I have seen more availability for PS5s than I have any time before. And I was lucky enough to get the discless version, which I am very excited to talk about today because it has been 2 years since the PlayStation 5 launched, which is absolutely mind-boggling to me considering that it feels like it just came out, and because it's so unattainable to a lot of people, it still feels like a brand new console. Now, what's very interesting is that the PS5 still sounds like a new console to a lot of people because it has been so unattainable, but 2 years into a console cycle means that it's kind of hitting its peak and also starting to start its downfall a little bit as well, or at least it would. But the PlayStation 5 and even including the Xbox Series X are kind of having a different experience because of the way these consoles are both scarce to be found and also the way the companies are treating the older generation of consoles as well. Back in the day, the Xbox 360 got maybe a year's worth of games before completely switching over. Nowadays, because the PS5 stock is so limited, we're still seeing games released for PS4 like God of War Ragnarok when exclusives should really start happening. And I don't want to say that to be classist. I understand that we actually do need PlayStation 4 and Xbox One games to come out because nobody can get a goddamn PlayStation 5, but I think it also is hindering what the PlayStation 5 can do. Or at least that was my hypothesis before I went into the benchmarks. But I want to hop into the benchmarks and then tell you my final opinions afterwards. So let's get right into it. I would like to apologize. For some reason, the PlayStation 5 did not record at 4K, even though I had it at the 4K setting. With that said, the biggest difference that you'll see in this footage, unfortunately, is the difference between 60 and 40 FPS, but I will tell you the differences between performance and fidelity mode as well, which are not very much. Starting off with The Last of Us Part 1, the first PlayStation 5 exclusive, I was very impressed by this game. It is a remake, unfortunately, which means that it still has some of the quirks of the old game in terms of gameplay itself, but it is a ground-up remaster, which means that it is pushing the PS5 to its absolute limits. What you're seeing right now is the performance mode, which runs at 60 FPS at a variable 1440p, and I think it looks fantastic. Not only does it look fantastic, but running at a smooth and constant 60 FPS is a wonderful experience that I'm so glad I get to see on new consoles. But if you would like to hurt your eyes, you can switch it to fidelity mode to get a nice and crunchy 30 FPS. And this is where I have the most issues with the PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X. Just the way developers in general are handling the frame rates is by going with a 60 FPS and 30 FPS target as opposed to just a whatever frame rate. I think that there should always be a mode. You don't need to have a variable refresh rate TV to enable that option. You don't need it. You don't need G-Sync to play at 40 FPS. So I think that having an option to play at this higher resolution that's native 4K, but being able to play it at an uncapped frame rate would make things better, because I don't think that the change between 1440p and 4K is going to push the PS5 as much as the 30 FPS difference makes it seem. Because as you can tell in this footage, fidelity mode doesn't make the game look better. There are some games that it does that, and I'll get into those later, but the only difference is resolution. So if you're like me and you're fine with 1440p, then I think that performance mode is just the way to go. You're getting very minimal gains for literally half the frame rate, which is the issue that I have. Another recent game is God of War Ragnarok. Once more, we see performance and fidelity presets, with the only difference being resolution. There really is no other difference that I was able to discern with my eyes, which just sucks. I hate that you have to go all the way down to 30 FPS for a higher resolution, especially only a 25% increase from 1440 to 4K, but I digress. God of War Ragnarok looks very good. I think that it could look better had it been given the full potential of the PlayStation 5 instead of being a PS4 game as well. But as we are going through these benchmarks, you can kind of see that I don't actually think the PS5 is all that powerful anymore, because of how these games supposedly have to run at 30 FPS to hit 4K when they are able to run at 30 FPS 1080p on a PlayStation 4. So are we seeing the max potential of the PlayStation 5? And if so, that's really disappointing. The leap between the 7th and 8th generation of consoles, the Xbox 360 to the Xbox One, was astronomical. And the Xbox One X and PlayStation 4 Pro feel a lot like what the PS5 and Xbox Series X are doing now. Just a resolution increase, which is very disappointing to see. I really wanted these consoles, especially the PlayStation 5, to just be an absolute powerhouse. And unfortunately, it seems like it is not. If it can struggle to run this game at 30 FPS at 4K, then I don't know if we are going to see many better looking games, which kind of frightens me a little bit. But that is something for future me to find out about. As you can see, God of War looks great at both performance and fidelity mode. If you are fine with 30 FPS experience, then have it your way, like Burger King, but I am not that kind of life. I'm just glad there are 60 FPS toggles in every single game. The only time that there isn't is when the game runs natively at 60 FPS, like the next one on our list, Returnal, which ran at a very smooth 60 FPS with no option to turn up or down visuals in order to hit that frame rate or get better visuals, which means that we are seeing this game at its absolute best while still running at 60 FPS, which is what PlayStation 5 exclusives need to do in the future to prove the PlayStation 5's worth. With that said, of course, the PlayStation 5 is already selling like nobody's business, so that's just my opinion as a tech nerd. That's not the case for everybody else. But I think that in order to prove its value of an existing piece of hardware, I think that it does need to stand out and above the PlayStation 4 and PlayStation 4 Pro, and I don't quite think it's hit its stride yet because we are still forcing old consoles to run new games. Returnal ran perfectly fine with no issues whatsoever. We saw a constant 60 FPS, and it looks fantastic. I'm pretty sure this was native 4K, or maybe dynamic res, but honestly, the difference between dynamic 4K and 4K isn't that big. Up next is The Last of Us Part 2. Now, this is another game that didn't really have a preset to it, from what I remember. It was just one preset, which was 60 FPS, which is perfect. That's how it should be, and I was very happy to see that. I think that's how all PlayStation 5 games should be, as well as Xbox Series X titles, too. These games should be able to run at 60 FPS, period. And the fact that there are toggles is kind of interesting to me. Last of Us 2, though, looks absolutely wonderful. It is a PlayStation 4 game, obviously. But with that said, the PlayStation 5 handles it very well, and it looks fantastic. Five Nights at Freddy's Security Breach is an interesting beast, because this is not the PlayStation 5's fault for this game looking and running awfully. The PlayStation 5 is more than capable of running a somewhat AAA title like Five Nights at Freddy's Security Breach. Truth of the matter is Five Nights at Freddy's Security Breach just sucks when it comes to optimization. It's a fun game, but when we were in performance mode, we were not seeing a constant 60 FPS. There were a lot of frame dips down to the 30s that I could feel, and you should be able to see it in this gameplay as well. So I don't know how we got it to run in fidelity mode. It really doesn't look that much better. The lighting is definitely improved, but even still, the resolution, sure, but anti-aliasing still sucks on it. So the interesting thing that I want to note about Security Breach and why I have it in the benchmarks is because the fidelity mode didn't cap it to 30 FPS. There were parts where it went up, which was very impressive to see, and again, how I think all games should be. I'm not saying that for every single case. I think that there should be a third option for something like this, because I understand that a constant 30 FPS is more comfortable to look at for some people than a juddery 30 to 40 FPS is. With that said, I just think having the option would be nice. But Security Breach ran very poorly. I'm not surprised. Oh, and SpiderMan. The saving grace and what I want to see out of the PlayStation 5. This game is amazing. You can tell it was made in-house. Miles Morales is wonderful. But with that said, in terms of performance, it is the best game on the PlayStation 5 because you have three options. You have performance mode, which is a constant locked 60 FPS, which is wonderful. There is also 120 FPS toggles in quite a few games that I've talked about, but I haven't had time to benchmark them, nor do I have a 120 Hz TV. But with that said, if you'd like to see me do a 120 Hz review in the future, let me know in the comments down below. There is also a ray tracing performance mode for 60 FPS with ray tracing on. This is what everybody should use, period. There is no point to bump things down to the performance mode, and there's no point to bump things up to the fidelity mode either. You are getting a perfect experience with the middle ground of having ray-traced reflections at 60 FPS on a $400 to $500 console, which a PC at $400 to $500 can't do. And you are sacrificing no frame rate. It is amazing. I love it so much. And then, of course, as we get into the fidelity mode, it runs at a 30 FPS. It does look slightly better than performance ray tracing does, but not nearly enough to merit a 30 FPS cut. So those were all the benchmarks that I have. Now, I have been an Xbox fanboy for a very long part of my life, since I was 4 years old to be exact. PlayStation 5 just completely whooped Xbox this generation, y'all. The Xbox Series S, I think, is ruining the Xbox side of things on top of Game Pass, something like that. PlayStation 5 has the exclusives. Xbox has no exclusives. Not even, like, PC exclusives either. I'm not even just saying that. There are no exclusives for the PC Game Pass or regular Xbox that are Xbox Series S exclusive, or at least have the power to run on the Xbox Series X, or have justification to use the power of the Xbox Series X. PlayStation 5 is just wiping the floor with exclusives right now, and they don't even have that many exclusives. If this was any other generation, I think people would be hating on PlayStation for not having enough games coming out this year, but not having enough games 10 years ago is the same thing as Xbox only having like 0 exclusives right now. I think that it is understandable why the PlayStation 5 is starting to struggle in these games that are able to run on the PlayStation 4. I think that it's easy to take it out of perspective and say that, oh, this console's supposed to be great. But considering the hardware itself, whether you have a disc or discless is the only difference between $400 and $500. It means that you're essentially buying a $400 PC. And it actually runs better than a $400 PC could, especially with ray tracing. So I highly recommend the PlayStation 5 for anybody who wants it in 2022. I think that it's still a very justifiable purchase. You don't need to wait for a Pro or anything like that. There aren't enough games coming out to warrant a Pro, or to feel the need for a Pro, because everything still runs at 60 FPS or 30 FPS depending on what you want. I would just like to see an uncapped frame rate option, and I really hope that the PlayStation 5 isn't losing steam already. I just want to see what happens in the future. I'll probably update this video in a year from now to see how things have progressed. But for right now, in 2022, the PlayStation 5 is a no-brainer. As an Xbox fanboy, get a PlayStation 5 instead of an Xbox. The PlayStation 5 is an amazing piece of hardware, and I highly recommend it to people. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you liked it, like, subscribe, do what you usually do, and as always, buy yourself something nice.